Good morning, all who have joined us at Tuesday, Sarah Stevenson's Tuesday Forum. It's April the 26th. It's 8:30 a.m. I'd like to welcome everyone. I am Laura McCletty, one of the facilitators for the forum, along with Mary Johnson, Jackie Edwards, Walton, Steve Johnson, Natalie McEra, Winston Robinson, Carlinia Ivory Canty, and Saritha Sherrill. We always like to start off with the word of prayer. Saritha, would you share a word with us this morning?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Good morning. Let us bow our heads in prayer. To our Creator, we are thankful for every day. We're thankful for another week. We fully realize that the information imparted to us here is food for our very souls. Our wish is to take the information, fold it into ourselves, and sprinkle it among others so that we are made better persons, better citizens, more informed citizens, more resourceful persons in our city. Our wish is that the information today will help us to better understand the tweets, the posts, the messages, and all information imparted to us. Bless us today as a unit. Bless the children every place. Bless our world. Bless our nation. Bless our state, our county, our city, our neighborhoods. It's in your son Jesus' name we always pray, God. Amen.
Thank you, Saritha. We appreciate that. Our speakers today are the City Council at Large Republicans' primary candidates. We have Kyle Luby, David Merrill, Charlie Mulligan, Carrie Olinsky, and David Michael Rice. Before we get started, if there's anyone here that's here for the first time, with the exception of our candidates, please raise your hand so we can recognize you and welcome you and invite you to come back, because we meet almost every Tuesday morning throughout the year. I don't see any raised hands. Do you, Natalie?
I don't.
Okay, so we are all familiar with the process. But just as a reminder, we're asking those that maybe, those that are on the phone, of course, you may have to send a text message if that number is behind you still, Steve, to one of those telephone numbers. But we have been receiving a lot of questions through our chat. But we ask you, those that are online, to put in the chat any questions that you would have. And we will, of course, I will be asking those questions. And we like to keep things in order. So just to remind you, the participation in the forum is a privilege sustained by agreement to stay on topic, to treat all participants with respect, and to honor decisions of facilitators. Violators may face immediate suspension of the privilege. So we ask you to, for those that will be speaking, our guest speakers today, we're going to allow you 2 minutes to do a presentation and just talk to us a little bit about your platform. And after we cover everyone, we will go in through the question and answering process. Once we do that, we will ask you to respond, but respond in less than 3 to 5 seconds. Am I correct?
No, that's too short. No.
Okay, what is it?
We can give a minute and a half to respond.
A minute and a half to respond. Okay. So Natalie, raise your hand, Natalie, is our timekeeper. And what we will do is, once you are 30 minutes into your time for your initial speech presentation, or even if you're answering, after you're answering the questions, she will notify you. Please pay attention to Natalie. And we'd like to also recognize our elected officials and those other candidates that are running at the end of our session. Now, last week was unusual. We had a very healthy discussion at the end of our session until 10:30. and that permission comes from Steve because he's operating our back room, we will have it open at least until 10 o'clock, just for general conversation. And for those candidates that are running, we were able to retain some of them until 10:30 last week. If you can't stay on, that would be great. We know that everybody is really busy. So with that being said, we just want to make sure that you understand the rules of how we try to conduct the forum and stay on course with what we are trying to do this morning as it relates to the candidate. So with that being said, I'd like to start with David Murrell. If you can just share with us for 2 minutes and pay attention to Natalie. Thank you.
I started my own timer too. Thank you. So thank you all so much for having me here. I've lived in Charlotte for the last 10 years. I first moved here just before the DNC, lived in South Charlotte for a few months, and decided I wanted to explore different parts of town and moved to Wesley Heights. I was getting married, moved to the east end of Charlotte, lived there for quite a few years and said, you know, this is great, but I want to be back in the heart of the city. And as of 2 years ago, I'm back in West Charlotte, in the West End, and I absolutely love it here. And I'm running for city council because as much as I love this city, there is so much that we can do better. And I feel like we're leaving behind so many of our people. My neighborhood is very, very quickly gentrifying. One of my neighbors who I hadn't seen in a while, I finally got to talk to this weekend, lives in a house that he paid $73,000 for. Directly across the street from him is a house that sold new for $800,000. It's probably worth $900,000 now. That first neighbor that's been here is part of the fabric of this community, and he's a big part of the reason that I'm running. I don't want to see him get gentrified and pushed out of this neighborhood. When he's ready, he and his family will make a great amount and do very well. But again, I want to make sure that he's able to stay here as long as he possibly can. So I'm going to plan on tackling, of course, public safety like all of us are, but specifically focus on affordable housing, both home ownership, affordable places to rent, and making sure that that is a true foundation or the bedrock for all of the other services that we can provide, which are going to include transportation, economic mobility, early childhood education, and so much more. So again, thank you for this opportunity to introduce myself, and I look forward to talking with all of you soon.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Carrie. Carrie, you're muted? You need to unmute. Okay.
Sorry, I didn't hear it was soft. I'm assuming you called on me.
Yeah.
All right. So thank you so much for having me. My name is Carrie Olinsky, and I'm running for City Council at large. So I've actually lived in North Carolina all of my adult life. I actually went to Gardner-Webb for my college years, and then returned back to North Carolina to work in a rural area for my physician assistant career. And I actually moved to Charlotte about 6 years ago with my husband, and we had our first baby, who we spoke of a little bit earlier, Eliana, who's actually still sleeping. So we're going to hopefully that stays for a little while longer. But anyways, I'm running kind of for three reasons. One, I feel that I'm called to do so, and I'm following the Lord in his leading me with my steps. And then two, like I said earlier, I became a mom in the pandemic, and I'm really fighting. I'm fighting for her future as well as the other children of Charlotte, because I feel that crime has increased over these last couple of years, and that's a really important thing for me, because I think that our children obviously are our future and they deserve our utmost attention. And then lastly, I am, like I said, a physician assistant, and so I am a political outsider, so to speak. And one of the things that we really encompass in my type of medicine, which is functional medicine, is the tenet on running that we try to get to the root of the problem. And I do that by listening to people, listening to their whole story, and thinking outside the box to try to be able to help them reach their goals. And so I do feel that I could bring that to City Council and provide a holistic purview, as well as giving solution-based approach. I do, like I said earlier, I do think public safety is the biggest thing for me. If our residents don't feel safe, for me, nothing else really matters. We need to make sure that everyone does feel safe here. And I really want to support all of our first responders in that. And and basically gain ways that we can use our first responders and build that with the community to be able to create a better, safer city. So thank you for listening.
Thank you. Cal.
Hello, everybody, and thank you all for having me. First, I've actually been able to speak here because normally I just put things in the chat. So my name is Kyle Lupke. I am running for City Council at large. My campaign is focusing on three main issues: housing affordability for homes to own, transportation that works for everybody, and a small business ecosystem that doesn't reward the rich and powerful, but instead rewards our small businesses. On the housing to own, it is near impossible to buy a home in this city, and home ownership is the way that we build generational wealth, especially in communities that have often been left behind, such as communities on the west side and the north side. So I want to incentivize developers to build homes to own, and I also want to ensure that individuals are not taxed out of the homes that they own through rising property taxes, similar to what David was mentioning. On transportation, I am a transit rider. I used to live off of Tuckasegee and rode the 8 and the 34 every single day. We had to move down to South Charlotte because my fiance needed to be closer to work. It was taking him an hour and a half to get home with traffic. And so now I take the 19 or the 20, and they suck. I mean, our transit system sucks, and it needs a lot of improvement. And we are, as a city, are focusing on bright and shiny objects like light rail that won't actually help the people who utilize our transit system. So I want to make our bus system fast, frequent, and efficient for every single person in our city. And then small business ecosystems. Right now, to go through the procurement and RFP process for the city, you need an army of lawyers, accountants, bunch of individuals that you have on staff, versus the small businesses who maybe have 5 people on staff just don't have the time to actually engage with the city and to go through the procurement process. So I want to break up our RFPs, get rid of bundled contracts. Will that be difficult? Absolutely. But that means that you need leadership that will actually prioritize that to get it done. So I want to make small businesses have access to our city because they're the people who hire local. So again, my name is Kyle Lupke, and I look forward to the questions and discussion. Thank you all.
Carol. Charlie.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. Like I was mentioning earlier as we were all gathering, any chance I can make it, I always enjoy these forums. It's so important to give a chance for the community, hear from our leaders, and hold them accountable. So thank you. And I'm also really glad that my friend Cedric is here, because we were just talking the other week. I think that there are 2 types of candidates in this city, and this is what we were talking about. There are candidates that are for the city, or it's for the people, and there are candidates that are for the politics. And one of the things that I want to convey and hopefully convince everyone of is that I'm for the people, for the city. And that's the name of my campaign, Charlie for the City. My vision for Charlotte is that we are a thriving, multicultural southern city. And I think we're failing on all 3 of those points right now. We know the parts of town that are not thriving. It's the east side, the west side, parts of the north side. We know the parts of town that get all the attention, all the new shiny buildings, and have the infrastructure in place. That is a legacy that this city has carried as long as I've been alive and far beyond that, right? And we are still repaying that debt. So that is something that I'm focused on fixing. Secondly, I've lived here basically my whole life, moved down here when I was 2, and in those 30 years, we've gotten more segregated, not less. That's a problem. But Charlotte has the potential to really, we are a majority minority city. We have the potential to be a true melting pot that showcases the best that our city has to offer, not just the sanitized, cleaned up, white millennial playground that we often seem like we are. And so I'd like to see that change. And third, I want to see us regain a sense of our soul. The soul of our neighbor. David was alluding to this. When we force people from our establish neighborhoods out without any plan or care or concern for those individuals, every single time that happens, we lose a little bit of the community's soul. For too long.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you, Charlie. David Michael Rice. Is David Rice on?
I don't believe so.
Okay, that gives our other candidates a little more time. At this time, we like to start entertaining questions that we have. And here again, I will call on those, and we will give you a minute and a half to answer the questions. The first question that I have is, some questions have been texted to me. Do you believe we could do more to strengthen the city's MWBE's program? If so, what would you recommend? And I will start with Kyle.
Could you repeat the question? It was a little soft.
Yeah.
I couldn't hear it.
Okay. Do you believe we should and could do more to strengthen the city's MWBE program? And if so, what would you recommend?
Yeah, so right now the MWBE program is just a recommendation as opposed to a requirement, because we obviously can't require things under state contracting and procurement laws. And so that's why we have to think of different potential ways to go about working on this. Breaking up the RFP process will benefit specifically to MWBE corporations and individual companies, because they're the ones who are generally your local smaller businesses who will then have access to the procurement process. So we can also look at when we have that breaking up of the procurement process and these bundled contracts, we can look at developing that pipeline to encourage and ensure that these particular companies led by minorities and females, that they have the opportunity to have the access to the city through that kind of pipeline that we would develop with them. I would also like to this point, I think that it would be good to look at fake MWBE firms. That might be a little aggressive there, but a lot of white individuals, for example, white male individuals who own a company will share over 51% to a female and then become an MWBE firm when it's really still a white male controlled firm. So maybe a little bit more understanding and nuance of how we actually approach certifying those particular companies.
Okay. Next, Charlie.
Yeah, I mean, I love this question because my professional experience is actually in economic development and workforce development. And so the current process, as Kyle alluded to, is mostly based off a quota system, not officially, but essentially that's the intent. While I think that is well-intentioned, we need leaders who understand not just how you throw scraps to the minority community. Hey, we'll give you a contract every now and then, but how we actually invest in pipelines and ecosystems so that small businesses, minority-owned, women-owned, whatever the case may be, can actually win city contracts on their own terms. Because otherwise, the favored status can oftentimes be exploited by the same, like Kyle was talking about with Shell, MW, SBs, et cetera. And so I started a small business in this city, and I know, and as a white man, and so I get that's different than a minority or woman owner. But even for me, there were so many moments where we are this close to failing. And that's what it's like running a small business. You need that critical intervention right at the right time, whether that's a little bit of capital to go from one location to two, whether it's legal or accounting advice. And this city is always behind the ball when it comes to that. I think we really like to do the big announcement and cut the ribbon and say, hey, we've done this for the minority community, or we've done that. But what we really need to do is roll our sleeves up and invest in building an ecosystem and an infrastructure. I work with a group called BoostPad, for instance, which is a venture incubator specifically for Black and Brown entrepreneurs. And the entire idea is giving those entrepreneurs the expertise that they need to thrive on their own terms. And I haven't seen the city be committed to that. And that's what I would like. It's not enough to just throw the scraps. We need a real, because my number one issue is upward mobility. We need a real plan to build that out for everybody.
Okay, Carrie. Carrie, can you hear us?
Yeah, mute again.
Sorry, I'm new to WebEx, and so I'm trying to remember to put it on. I'm going to be honest, this is not my strongest suit in terms of, I know that we need to be able to provide more opportunities for the MWBEs to come to the table and be able to have those opportunities to have contracts within the city, and also for these owners to promote their businesses and help them where we can. I would have to defer to what Kyle and Charlie both said, because I am learning in this process, and I will be honest, I don't know enough for this particular subject, even though I do appreciate it and I do want to learn more. So unfortunately, I don't have anything more to add.
Okay, David.
I've got plenty more to add, but I think Kyle and Charlie said that so well that I'd just be repeating the same things that they said. So I'll go on to say the old phrase, a rising tide sinks all ships. A rising tide raises all ships, excuse me. I was thinking about Ukraine. And I think this is a phenomenal opportunity, because as we create more opportunities for everyone in the community, the entire community gets stronger. This is something that we really need to focus on. Charlie and Kyle are certainly our experts on this, and we look forward to following their lead in how to make sure we're doing this the right way.
Okay, thank you very much. This question is for Kyle. What specifically are your plans for incentivizing developers to build SFHs, and what time frame? And what time frame would you give them to do that?
Sure. So I'll first deal with the time frame, and then I'll deal with the other part of the substantive question there. So the time frame is going to, if we get in July, if we are elected, we will be voting on the Unified Development Ordinance. And the Unified Development Ordinance is going to be the vehicle by which we will be incentivizing or allowing certain things for development in our community. So I would say that the time frame to implement tweaks and changes to the UDO are going to be immediate. And if there are any changes that would need to be made in the future, those would be like at the 6-month mark, maybe the year mark, all of which we'd be able to do. On the specific incentives that I would like to use for developers to build homes to own, I don't just think single-family homes are necessarily the homes to own. We could have other more denser forms of homes to own, like townhomes, condos, duplexes, triplexes. The way to do that is through a couple mechanisms that the UDO is already implementing for other types of development. So there's affordable housing development that is not necessarily specific for homes to own, where there are setback bonuses or sidewall bonuses within the UDO. Same with green space. I would like to have a set aside specifically for home ownership, as opposed to just a general affordable housing development. And so I would be incentivizing there with, setback requirement, allow for a more denser development, and then differences in sidewalls.
Okay, thank you. And this is for all. Charlotte is seen by some as a town that caters to developers. What would be your approach for leveling the playing field between communities and developers during the rezoning process, regardless of the zip code?
So I can take that one first.
I'm sorry,
yeah.
who is that? I'm sorry, is that David?
Sorry, that was Charlie.
Charlie, okay, go ahead, Charlie.
Thank you, Ms. Laura. So that's correct. That Charlotte is known as a place that rolls over for developers. Um, Now that's due to a couple of things. First, I think we should qualify the term when we use developer. I feel much differently about how the city should approach small, locally based mom and pop developers who are really interested in building the type of housing that we need in the city versus large, especially out of state developers who are interested in one thing and one thing only, which is profit. But I think the 2040 plan and the UDO are a perfect example of the way that the mistakes that we make and how we approach this. Yes, there has been effort to try to get out information about both of those things, but we package it as a city, we package it in such a dense set of arcane terms and real estate terminology. Instead of actually going proactively to the communities and explaining, this is what your community is going to look like if this is passed, right? And so what that means is we have a community members who always feel like they're behind the eight ball when development comes up. And I have community members tell me all the time, well, I sent so many emails to my district representative. They said they were going to do this or that. And then all of a sudden, when the time for the vote came, they switched their vote. Well, folks, when that happens, when a vote is switched, that means somebody got the ear of that district representative and knows better than the community members how to influence them. And I think that is due to our lack of ability to reach out proactively to the community and really explain and engage. This shouldn't be a shell game where we're trying to, check the box on communicating with the community and then actually secretly do what the developers want at the end of the day. So I see too much of that in the city, and that stops with me.
Okay, Carrie.
Yeah, I'd like to just tack on to what Charlie said, and the fact that, I think it's important that we start looking at some of the history of some of these developers. Charlotte is, as we all know, is one of the biggest cities. It's, top 15 cities. And so I think at this point, we have enough pull that we can look at developers who share the same values that we do, and be able to be a little bit, I don't know if picky is the right word, but essentially that is to really pick out the developers that share our same values, and I think really do show that they want to have the greater good for Charlotte. And again, like Charlie said, I think we do need to keep our city leaders accountable as well to what they said they were going to do.
Okay, David.
Laura, I think you said me.
Yes, David, I'm sorry.
So I want to follow up on something Charlie said in his introduction, which is that we are here to listen to folks. And that's one of the things we don't think the city council is doing. And that developers are really pushing back against. We need to listen to the people in the communities where the developers want to build and find out what we think is going to be best for their community based on what they tell us. They're going to know everything in this area much better than we ever could. There's 11 people on the city council, but there's a lot more neighborhoods than that. We need to rely on the local experts and not be afraid to push back on things that just don't make sense for this city. There is a lot of development work that we need, and we have to keep in mind that when it comes to things like developing single-family housing, after the residential housing bubble burst in 2008 and 9, a lot of developers for single-family homes and residential properties went under. And that's a big part of the reason we're having the affordable housing issue is we just don't have the affordable housing. So we need to work with them on housing. We need to work with people in developing infrastructure. And then when people do want to come in and build these large commercial developments, we need to make sure that they are following our plans, developing one in the right way with streetscapes, cityscapes, and the infrastructure needs that work for everybody in that community, not just on that particular street.
Okay, and Kyle.
Yeah, so I'm gonna follow up on what Charlie said too here. So the 2040 plan and the Unified Development Ordinance are two documents that are full of jargon and are full of terms that most people in the city of Charlotte just don't know or not aware of, and it's very complex documents. And the UDO is 608 pages long. With this specific question, what's interesting is that the reason why the UDO was developed and is going to be passed is because there was too much of a engagement between community members and developers, and it was a constant horse trade. And so the UDO's purpose is to basically ensure that developers have certainty and that community doesn't have voice. And so when we think about how our Unified Development Ordinance is actually being implemented, it is being implemented to establish by right zonings so that if there is a development that wants to go into your neighborhood, then, and you don't want it as a community member and your community organization doesn't want it, well, then you're just screwed. And so I think one of the ways that we can level that playing field is, again, taking a very close look at that particular document. Don't allow for, complete rezoning of the entire city for triplexes and quadplexes, and instead have that conversation at the neighborhood level for different projects, as necessary. So I think that there's ways that we can really improve upon in the UDO for that purpose of the engagement between the community and developers.
Okay, thank you. And this is for all of the candidates as well. This person has asked that each candidate share what beliefs that you have, what principles you have of the Republican Party most resonate with you, and how you feel about the party today.
I could take that one as well, Ms. Loris. Charlie.
We will start with Carrie. Did you all hear that question? Carrie, did you hear the question?
I'm sorry, can you ask it one more time?
Yes. This is a request for each of your candidates to share what your principles and beliefs are of the Republican Party and what most resonate with you and how you feel about your party today.
I think one of the biggest things for the Republican Party, it tends to be more conservative, and low taxes is part of that. I do think, at least for me, one of the biggest things is that I think we've seen a morphine of both parties, for better or for worse. And what I really want to push on for me is that I do feel that I've been a servant my whole life, starting from middle school to college to now in my current job, being overseas, and ultimately is that I want to see the betterment of people. I think that's a biblical response to take, is to be a servant among all. And so where I really want to kind of push that people see that is, it's not a matter of, where you come from or where you are. I want to be able to help you go where you're going, in whatever capacity that may be. And so that's really sort of the true tenet of where I'm pushing for myself. I think there can be different viewpoints across the board, and there's nuances to everything. But for me, it's being able to serve and to help support people wherever they need.
Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, and one thing I should mention, which I think will be clarifying perhaps for everybody on the call, is that Carrie, David, Kyle, and I are running together as a slate for this campaign. So this is why you may hear that all of us are sort of agreeing with one another. We would like to be elected together for the city council, and each of us have various expertises that we bring to this. But regarding the question to the Republican Party, I'm a Republican because I believe that the best solutions come from empowering people, right? Starting from the bottom up, not from the top down. Now, that's why I am personally a Republican and why I resonate with that. I want to be very clear about something, especially in regards to this particular question. The way that my party has interacted with especially Black and Brown communities and historically in this city is a disgrace. And I have no problem saying that. The lack of engagement that we often see, the unwillingness to see different points of view, is, I think, a problem and part of the reason. I mean, every politician can only own his or her own responsibility or his or her own party's responsibility to the division that we see today in the city, in the country. So I'm running because I believe, as a different party and as a different point of view, there is a chance for real reform in this city. But it does start with holding our own party accountable. And I think that's, I can understand why a question like that might be raised, considering that historically, if we're looking at the past 10 to 15 years since McCrory was no longer mayor, Republicans really haven't had anything but an outsider's view on how the city is run. And what I would encourage is that all four of us on this slate are taking a very different approach than what you might expect. And I'd hope community members that I've worked with that are on this call would feel that way as well. And so, we're looking for something different.
Okay, David.
I think Carrie and Charlie both answered that very well. And not to keep saying that I think Carrie and Charlie answered that very well, but they did. It really comes down to what they've said and providing opportunities and individual freedoms. I think with both major parties, we see extreme people on the far left and the far right, and they're the ones that get all the attention. And I don't think that's really the truth of what either party is. But as Charlie mentioned, while everybody should have equal opportunity in this city, that's just not the way that it is. So we think that everybody should have the same rights, the same freedoms, the same responsibilities, but that's not the case. So I guess in some ways, that's the things that we're for and against. And as Charlie mentioned, the city council has been very dark blue for quite some time. We think that part of the reasons we have the issues that we do, is because of the way that we voted and the people that we put into office. I've been talking to people throughout the city all week long who are very, very frustrated about how things have run, the lack of transparency. And we're going to tackle that. And I think by doing that and providing the insights and the transparency that you're not receiving, we're going to make a lot of positive changes very quickly.
Okay, thank you. And Kyle.
Yeah, so for me, I'm a conservative and I'm a Republican because I believe that the smaller that we get and engage in our communities with more local kind of engagement, the better off we are as a society. I talked about earlier the RFP and procurement process underneath the city and how right now it benefits the rich and the powerful, the individuals who are big, who can hire the lawyers, who can hire the accountants, who have the staff to go through the procurement process. Well, I'm a conservative because I do not believe that that is effective or beneficial government. I think that focusing on ensuring that the local mom and pop shop has access, that is what makes me a conservative. Ensuring strong families, strong communities, strong nonprofit organizations, strong religious institutions, that's what makes me conservative, and that's a tenet of the Republican Party that I value. I'm not afraid to call out my party when I see that my party has gone wrong. You can Google my name and see how I fought with Mark Robinson with his anti-LGBT comments back last year. I'm the president of the Log Cabin Republicans in North Carolina, and it is my responsibility as a gay man to push back of those in my party when they are attacking me and attacking my family and attacking my community. And so that's because I view my role as someone who has integrity, and if I do not stick up for myself, nobody else will. And so that's what makes me conservative, but I'm also not afraid to call out my party when necessary.
Okay, thank you. And since I have you, Kyle, I have one question for you. And the question is, what is your track record for hiring local?
Yeah, so I responded to Christine in the chat here as well privately on this one. I am not a small business owner, so I have not hired local in the past. I wish I was a small business owner, but my calling was a little bit different. So that's my answer there.
Okay. For all, what policies regarding economic development I'm sorry, I lost that one. Hold on just a second. What policies regarding economic development and minimizing the impact of gentrification? Say it again.
I can take that one first if you'd like.
What policies regarding economic development and minimizing the impact of gentrification should be placed on the city's Unified Development Ordinance, the 2040 plan?
So this is
I
Charlie.
start with Charlie. Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, sorry to just jump in there. Yeah, so we talk all the time about the impact of the terrible impact of urban renewal in our cities, so-called urban renewal. Our concern is that the current 2040 plan and the UDO are going to recreate those exact same conditions. So I do think economic development has a huge part to do with upward mobility and all those things. But I think the question was specifically asking about 2040 plan and UDO, which has much more to do with housing. Here's the conditions that I think we are concerned about. When we put by right zoning in these neighborhoods, it sounds great on the face, but the problem is the neighborhoods that we are concerned about, the black and brown neighborhoods in the Crescent, are the ones who are going to face the impacts of this. The affluent neighborhoods in the South, the city, that we think should be, that I believe should be faced with denser housing and more infill, they have housing covenants and they will be protected. The neighborhoods that are going to get bulldozed and covered in multifamily housing are going to be the black and brown neighborhoods. And so I know that that is not the intention of the policy. Obviously, that is not the intention of the policy. Unfortunately, that is the effect that is going to have. There hasn't been enough engagement yet. I have no interest in protecting Myers Park. You know, that's not why I'm opposed to the 2040 plan or the UDO. I have an interest in it because I know the impact that this is going to have. In fact, I think it's the same thing that we saw happen to Brooklyn and to Cherry, just under a different name and obviously under different intentions. But when we did urban renewal, that was under good intentions maybe as well. At least the people framed it that way. So I'm very concerned about the impact that both of those initiatives may have on our city.
Okay, Carrie.
Yeah, just tackling on to what Charlie said. You know, I was actually just reading an article yesterday about how there were these top 100 Fortune companies that it was more so about being incentivized to move here. But when they come here, they're bringing really top salary jobs. And so with the influx of those top salary jobs, just like Charlie said, if we're pushing more actual residential units, the amount of that, and then you have these influx of top salary jobs, it could essentially force people out of those situations and push more of the gentrification. And so I think one of the ways we needed to kind of minimize that is by offering home ownership and access to home ownership for whatever is being built. And I think that, like Kyle mentioned earlier, it could be different than just a single family home. It could be townhomes or even condos, just ways that we can start sort of providing more access to the home ownership. I think that could be one way to minimize it.
Okay, David.
The problem with the UDO, which is designed to work for everyone, means it doesn't work for anybody. And while I think it's been really well intentioned, it's really going to miss the target in a lot of different ways. I've read through several versions of summaries of it. I've read through a small fraction of the very large document that it is. And at the end of the day, it's really going to turn a lot of our neighborhoods into very blank slates. We're going to lose that character and that culture that we have in a lot of great parts of town, just like what Charlie said. So we need to look at things holistically. And one of the things that I think we need to increase as part of the UDO is changing the ability for somebody to add parcels with a requirement of having things. We talked about the wedge, and I don't see South Park Sally saying, hey, I want to split up my 10-acre single family home lot and build another house on it that might be reasonably priced. But no, I'm not going to do that now because I have to make it affordable. Unfortunately, that's just not going to happen. So we need to make sure we're looking at things on a much larger level. And as we're looking at things like the transit lines, when we have those TOD districts, making sure that those are ideal places where we can have higher density housing, not for rental, but for home ownership. Because every time we've expanded in the city with our transit lines, those areas have just absolutely boomed. I think of what the North Tryon corridor used to look like when I moved to Charlotte, especially around IKEA, what it looks like now, 5-6 years later, now that the light rail extension is on. It's a completely different community. So I think we need to do a better job of looking at that holistically and making sure that we're finding ways to grow and expand to improve our inventory for affordable home ownership in these areas, especially in areas that we know will increase in value and provide the opportunity for generational wealth for our citizens.
Okay, thank you. Kyle?
Yeah, so I think it's helpful for us to remember that the 2040 plan passed on a 6-5 vote, with almost every single district rep voting against it, with almost every single at-large rep voting for it. And that's really telling to me, because the district reps, I think, kind of understand what is going on in their different communities. I was opposed to I was a strategic advisor on the 2040 plan, and I was opposed to its implementation the way that it was done, with its complete upzoning of the entire city, and testified as much to council, kind of referencing what Charlie just referenced about how this is going to negatively impact communities of color in the Crescent, and is going to speed up gentrification and displacement. That's the reason why Councilmember Watlington and Councilmember Johnson also voted against the 2040 plan for those very reasons. Councilmember Newton voted against the 2040 plan because of the lack of economic infrastructure on the east side. And if we are really concerned about economic development in the city and how the UDO is going to eventually impact that, we need to really get serious about the infrastructure that we have in the community, especially over on the east side. So we were just talking with the Fenco neighborhood, Far East Neighborhood Association, a couple days ago, and there is no transit to get out there. There's really no emphasis on putting big, shiny projects like the new atrium facility over on a place like the east side. That should be what we are focusing on. I think, unfortunately, the 2040 plan is already passed, so we can't really, improve that particular document. But for the UDO, if I was to get elected, I would want to not upzone the entire city. I would want to only upzone along high-frequency transit corridors and then build out from there.
Okay, thank you. Now, we have quite a few questions, so I'm asking Natalie if you could give them 45 seconds to answer the questions, please, because we have quite a few. This is a yes or no question. Do you think that there is, hold on 1 second. Questions keep going. Systemic racism in Charlotte. This is simply a yes or no answer. So I am going to start with Carrie. Do you believe that systemic racism currently exists in Charlotte? Carrie, yes or no?
She's on mute. Unmute, Carrie.
Cal, did you hear the question?
Yes, I did.
Yes or no?
I don't think that's a yes or no answer or a question.
I think it's a yes or no.
I would say, yeah, I do not think that. So definitions of systemic racism are so complex, and I think that there are very clear examples of how the past and the structures put up into place, the systems put into place in the past impact the present. So, for example, the lack of the ability for Black and Brown individuals to get benefit from the GI Bill or to get FHA loans after World War II, that directly impacts how we are, the ability for generational wealth building in the communities now. And so I don't necessarily think that is a yes or no question. I think it is a very it's a more nuanced question than that.
Okay. Once again, 45 seconds. Okay, Carrie, can you hear us?
Yes,
Are you
I'm
still
sorry.
on
I
mute?
swear I'm gonna get this at some point during this to hit the mute button. But I mean, I agree with Kyle. I don't think it's a yes or no question. Again, I'm learning more on how people are feeling about this the more and more I talk to people. And I do think that people feel that this is still present, and it's still something I am working on to learn and understand this more from perspectives outside of what I know.
Okay, David.
I don't think that there is, but I think a lot of people feel that it is. And I come from a perspective that doesn't experience that. So I have to listen to people that say this does exist, listen to their opinion, and do what I can to help make sure that this situation does not exist.
Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, so I'm going to differ from my colleagues a little bit on this one. You'd have to be crazy to say that there isn't structural inequality in this city. So that's an easy. You look at, I mean, the east side doesn't even have the proper sewer and water infrastructure. Our city procurement process is set up to exclude small businesses, especially minority-owned small businesses. To me, this is, yes, there are structural racial inequalities that are built in this city that we must address.
Okay, crime was mentioned. Thank you. Crime was mentioned. Can you speak more on what your goals are planned for the city council to tackle this issue? Starting with Carrie.
So I know one of the biggest issues that we're seeing across the board, not only with our police department, with first responders as a whole, is the fact that there's just a shortage of labor, and a shortage of the police force, fire force, water force. And so I think we need to look at ways to be able to get more of the people back on to be able to work. And this will happen by making city of Charlotte more of a city of choice in terms of an employment basis. And we're not losing people. We're losing people for various reasons. A lot of it is actually retirement. And so we can bring in more people, and there's not as big of a funding issue there, because it's really just replacing and finding people to serve on our CMPD or fire and whatnot. So I think crime would go down by able to, like I said, be able to bump up on our overall amount of people that are currently serving.
Okay, Charlie.
Yeah, so actually, most of my political career, I've worked on criminal justice reform. I was actually very influential in the passage of Senate Bill 300 in the North Carolina General Assembly, which outlawed oftentimes racist local ordinances across the state. We recently had a kind of a big discussion in our city council about which city ordinances we should keep. So I definitely always bring that background in. But I will add to that, though, when it comes to really addressing crime. So Charlotte Mecklenburg Police Department was a pioneer in what is known as community policing. However, and which I applaud them for, and that's something that I support. But I do not believe that it is being executed properly right now. Carrie mentioned the staffing shortage. That's one part of it. But I will be putting pressure on CMPD to, if they're going to do community policing, that involves a couple of things. The idea is to actually interact with the community. You have to get out of your cruiser to do that. You cannot just meet with the churches and with the law-abiding citizens. You have to meet with the families that are impacted by the crime.
Okay. David?
I'm going to pick up right where Charlie left off with that, because I've been talking about it a lot. We did have a great job doing community policing, and we need to get back to it. I can tell you the police department does not feel respected. They don't feel like they have any dignity or voice with the current administration. They are no longer an employer of choice. And I believe they are 400 officers short right now. We are asking them to do too much with too little, and we're putting them in a situation where we are bound to get failures. So we do need to make the police department an employer of choice. We do need to have enough officers to be able to get out of their cruisers, as Charlie and I've mentioned many times before, to interact with people in the community, to show people that this CMPD and the Sheriff's Department are here to serve and protect. Nobody should be afraid of the police, but they need to be in the communities talking to people, and that's one of the best ways that they can prevent and solve crimes.
Time.
Okay. Cal?
Yeah, so I'm going to take a little bit of a different tack. I agree with my colleagues that we need more police officers to be getting on the street and engaging with the community. But I think the issue specifically with homicides and how it's impacting Black men, young Black men, is directly related to feelings of hopelessness and just not engagement in their community. And I would like to see the city provide grant funding or actually work with neighborhood organizations and nonprofits working in this space to provide those young Black men that sense of community that they're desperately searching for, because that is going to lead to the decreases in crime. If you feel valued and you feel loved and you feel a part of something, there's less opportunity that you're going to take to act out. So I think that is something we can do.
Okay, quick question, quick answer. What is your favorite Black restaurant that you like to eat? You like to eat? Starting with Cal.
So I would love to have said Kuzo's Cuisine, but because I used to live right across the street from there, but I can't eat lobster, and so that was always really traumatic for me when my fiance would get some and I couldn't eat it. But we really like Soul Central on Central, and Two Scoops is another one that we are big fans of.
Okay, your favorite, David?
Merch, Heart, and Soul. I remember walking up the street, seeing that place with Time to Kill, being hungry, and said, "Oh, that looks interesting. I want to go try it." It was phenomenal.
Okay, Carrie? Okay, we'll move to Charlie.
Yeah, so I live in the.
No, Charlie, go.
Yeah, I was going to say, well, I mean, you can't go wrong with Mertz, Heart, and Soul, but I live in the university area. Well, you can't go wrong with Lee and Louise either. Oh my God. But I live in the university area, and one that people sleep on is Nick and Mike's Bar and Grill, which is right up off of Tryon. So, like that.
Okay, Carrie.
Unfortunately, I have a ton of allergies, and so I actually don't tend to go out that much. So I don't have an answer for this question.
Okay.
On Carrie's chance to make my second favorite choice, which is Lulu's.
Okay. What are your plans to create living wage employment centers on the west side? Centers like Lowe's on South Boulevard or insurance call centers out at the university area. We need living wage employment centers closer to where upward mobility opportunities are needed. I'll start with Charlie.
Yeah, such a great question. We had a perfect opportunity literally 2 months ago, and that's Atrium's Innovation District. In fact, that will cap both city and county funding. I'm thrilled that the city gets a med school. It's been a long time coming, but one of the big arguments for getting city funding was the fact that living wage jobs would be created. Well, why did we put that in Uptown? Why did we put that in one of the hardest areas to get to? Because it's not just the middle of Uptown, it's like Dilworth Uptown. And I was told when I asked about this that people could take people working $15 to $17 an hour jobs could take the light rail. No, you can't. It's 12 blocks away. What are we talking about? So, and the bus service to that area is also non-existent. These are the types, and I have no idea why the current city council didn't push back and say, if you want city money, put that on the east side or the west side. We're not optimizing for what's most convenient for surgeons. Let's optimize for what's most convenient for the people who are actually going to be cleaning, doing all of the custodial work at that building. Because if we're serious about living wages, that's what we have to do.
Okay, David. Carrie?
I clicked my video back on instead of unmute. I think the thing we have to look at is making sure we're finding a place for that. There's a tremendous amount of opportunity here. And I think, frankly, one of the reasons that I moved to West End is this area has the opportunity to become everything that South End should have been. We are going to see a lot of growth and development that we're seeing that with all of the places that are coming in on the Berry Hill Road area through that Wilkinson corridor. So what is currently in plan to come to this area is already going to be the beginning of that. I think that we are at a point where, whether we want it or not, that type of living wage growth is going to come to West End, and there's not much we're going to be able to do to stop it.
Okay, Carrie. Carrie? Okay, Kyle?
What am I doing?
Yeah, so Carrie's figuring out her camera. So, you know, when I think of economic development and living wages on the west side, I'm not necessarily focused on the Enderley Park, Wesley Heights, Wilkinson corridor, because as David mentioned, those are gonna have a lot of significant economic mobility or economic jobs and economic creation. Unfortunately, I know that job creation is not going to benefit those who need it the most because houses in those areas are starting to go for $600,000, $700,000, $800,000. So when I'm thinking of jobs and economic mobility, I'm thinking of even further west, so like near the airport. I think that it requires intentionality on the part of City Council. Charlie brought this up. When we have a large economic development project, we need to be very intentional about where we are putting it if there is going to be the use of taxpayer money. We had the chance to do that with the Atrium Innovation District. We chose not to do that with the Atrium Innovation District, and I would have been
Okay, who did I miss?
Miss Laura, I'm ready. I'm sorry about that.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so just to kind of tack on to what Kyle said, as well as everyone. So I think we need to, you know, one of the things outside of public safety that I really want to work on with this is also workforce development. And I think education and us being able to put some of those intentions that Kyle had spoke of into those specific areas and be able to reserve that to pull back into the community and either train people in the work in these specific jobs that are needed would be one way that we could, you know, essentially help that area. And again, I think workforce development would be the way to go for that.
Okay, and I think that it is 9:30. Did I get everyone? Did I miss anyone? Okay, I'd like to once again thank all of you for participating this morning, and we know we still have questions, and we're asking those that are interested to go into the website for the Sarah Stevenson Tuesday Forum, and there may be some questions that are still in there.